Hey everyone, I thought I would do a tour of my soldering workbench. I mainly work on vintage stereo equipment, vintage test equipment, and vintage electronics in general, both solid state and tube. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around and we'll dive in. Start with the soldering iron. It's the most common item you're going to encounter here. I went with a Pace ADS 200. I did a lot of research on soldering stations when I upgraded from my old Weller WES 51, which I still keep around as a backup, and sometimes you want two irons, like removing surface mount caps. And the reason I went with this was, number one, it's made in America. Number two, the price was pretty good compared to the competitors. And ultimately, the driving factor was I was able to get the tweezer add-on for less money than I could have got the Hacko kit with the tweezers or any of the other competitors like JBC or Metcal. I do have to switch the cable for the tweezers and the iron. I can't run them both at the same time, but the reality is I don't need to do that. I rarely work on surface mount stuff, but when I do, it's really nice to have those. And Pace has been great. I actually had an issue with this unit. Apparently there was a small batch of these that they had to substitute a part with due to shortages during COVID. And I went to turn it on one day, and it just went full bore on all the way, no temperature control, and burned up the tip, and I luckily caught it. But their support was great. They sent me a new board inside it, and they replaced the tips that were ruined and everything. And I understand that could happen during COVID, and companies had to make some changes and things like that to continue production. So they were great to work with. The nice thing is, since they're American based, when you call their tech support, you get a guy in Virginia. I think they might be. I get the same guy every time. I think his name's Tony, and he's been awesome to work with. So they left a good impression on me. Like I mentioned, I keep the WS 51 around. That was my first real temperature-controlled soldering iron I bought, I think, in like 2007. And honestly, it's great for any of the type of work that I do for the most part. Single-sided circuit boards and tube equipment. So absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's been solid. Okay, and with the Pace ADS 200, I forgot to mention the tips that I use for the stuff I work on, which is usually printed circuit boards, usually one-side foil, sometimes they're two-sided, and also vacuum tube equipment is a 3/32 inch diameter. This is the ultra performance tip. You can kind of see the end gets fat there. And here's the regular version of that. So if I need a little more clearance around the tip, I'll use this one. I also have some of the smaller ones in the rare instance that I work on surface mount gear. And another soldering iron that most people seem to have or passed down from their grandparents or whatnot, Weller gun. This is the 8200, 100 or 140 watts. The only time I really use that is if I'm soldering the ground lug on a can capacitor and piece of vacuum tube gear or similar. But they're nice to have around. The next thing I have is a Pace SMR. What that is it's thermal wire strippers, and I love these. These were a major upgrade going from using regular wire strippers, which obviously I still have and use, to the thermal wire strippers. So these work on PVC, they work on Teflon. Supposedly they even get hot enough to cut through Kapton insulation, which I don't really use. These are pretty pricey normally. I think the list price on that setup's like $855, but I was able to piece this together. I found someone selling the base station and the hand piece on eBay, and there's also a foot pedal for it. That's how you actually turn it on and off. I had to buy that. I ended up getting it for about a third of the cost it would normally run you, so that was a huge upgrade. If you work with a lot of stranded wire that you're stripping often, and you don't want to nick anything, like it's literally impossible to nick or cut the stranded wire with this, it's worth it. Works great on like instrument cables, microphone cables, anything except for silicone cables you can't strip with it. So that was a huge upgrade. Highly recommended if you can swing it. And the other thing that's nice about it compared to some of the other ones, I forget another company makes one where it's kind of all in one unit, but this is nice because you can kind of reach into a chassis and strip a wire if there's like a short wire that you need to strip. So I don't have any regrets with purchasing that. And then next, the Hacko FR301 desoldering gun. This was one of my best investments so far. I did a lot of research on desoldering guns, and for the money, it's really hard to beat this thing. I mean, you'd be spending something like $900 or more for a unit that has a station, kind of, you know, base station like these guys back here, and there's really not much of a benefit to it. I rarely turn it past the first temperature setting. I normally keep the 1.3 millimeter opening, slightly extended tip on it. That seems to be a good compromise for just general purpose use. I also have the 1 millimeter, which is very rarely used, and then the larger 1.6, which is used on like power transistors and larger things like that. And I've had this for, I think, 3 years now, and still have the original tips that I bought. They haven't worn out yet. As long as you take care of them, they seem to last pretty long. And as long as you take it apart and clean it with the tools that they give you, and also these rods, I've never had it plug on me. I see people talking about needing to drill them out. I don't think so. One thing I would say, that if you have one of these and it starts to jam up on you, just dip the tip in some flux and then shoot the rod through it, and you can usually make it work. You might have to turn the temperature up, but I kind of wanted to upgrade to a higher end desoldering station, but the pros and cons, there's just not enough in the pros column, so I'm going to be sticking with this. They have another one that the base station, I forget the model number, FM204 maybe, you can take the handle off and it's kind of more like an iron shape, and I thought that would be nice to have, but I don't really have a problem with accessibility with the gun. There's a few things I did to this. First of all, I added a power light to it because you couldn't tell when it was on, which I really didn't like, especially since I do this here in my house. And I bought this switch off of Amazon, which is a timer switch. So I can select the amount of time. I normally just hit 15 minutes so it turns off. There's been a couple times I went to bed and I was just thinking, oh shoot, I think I left the desoldering iron on. The Pace soldering station does have an auto off, so that's nice. And then the wire stripper doesn't do anything unless you have your foot on the pedal, so that's also pretty good there. And then this stand, some people ask me about the stand. I'll put a link in the description if I can find it. This was a stand that I guess was only sold in the Japanese market, but it seems to work pretty well for holding the FR301 up on the bench. Next, I have the pretty popular quick 861DW hot air station for the very little surface mount work that I do. I also use it for melting heat or shrinking heat shrink quite a bit. And it's good. My only complaint with this one is that the lights flicker when you turn it on. I've seen a lot of people complain about it. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the video here, but I'll try to show you. So let's see. Yeah, it's not really showing it, but it's kind of annoying. And I've tried different things to isolate that, and I haven't had any luck. I don't think anyone's figured it out. But other than that, it works great, and the price is pretty good. Another thing that was a kind of pricey investment but worth it was the fume extractor. So I got the Hecko, I think it's the FA430. So there's the arm for it right there. And that sits down underneath the bench on the shelf. This is designed to sit on this shelf here. There's 3 settings on it for flow: low, medium, and high. I generally leave it on low. It's still pretty loud on low. And you'll notice the power switch is down there. So what I did was I bought this remote power switch from Amazon, and I just taped it onto the side of the bench, so when I turn it on, I just press the button. So it's easily accessible, and I'm not wearing out the filter. Let's see if you can hear that. But that's been a real game changer too, especially on a lot of this old tube equipment that I work on. That flux, when you get it hot, that old solder, it really smokes the place up. Like I'm in the basement here, and you can kind of see a haze. So this, with its HEPA filter, does a great job. So as far as solder is concerned, I use the Kester 6337 with the 44 flux, and I really like the 44 flux. I recently tried the 245 flux, which is also an RMA flux, but it's a no clean, and I don't seem to have as good results with it. I think the 44 is the best thing for rework of old equipment. And the no clean stuff, I guess, is more targeted at new assembly. So if you're working on like brand new clean PCBs and components, it works okay, but I'm not going to buy it again. I'm going to stick to the 44. I also have the Kester 44 in 6040, and I don't really have a preference. I can solder great with both of them, but if you're buying solder new, I would get the 6337. The price difference is very small, and there's a better chance your joints will come out better. So I would stick to that. And I really think that solder, I see a lot of people saying it's really hard to learn how to solder. And then I noticed they're using cheap solder. I don't even know if it's rosin core flux in it or whatever, but I've never had a problem with Kester 44. Even when I was new to this, years ago, I had 44 from the beginning, and I kind of got right into it, no problem. As far as desoldering wick goes, I really like this MG Chemicals Super Wick. I've got the 464, that's the one I use primarily. It's 2.5 millimeter wide. I also bought the 452, which is the same thing, but it's only 1.5 millimeter. Because I buy this by the 100-foot roll. This is actually 100, and that's a 50. Since it's a smaller diameter, that was okay. But I've tried some other brands, and nothing seems to work as good as this. They've got a really great flux in it. Go through quite a bit of it. And as far as additional flux beyond what's in the solder goes, I've got a few here. I've got this MG 8342. That's an active rosin flux. That one's pretty aggressive, so there's plenty of cases where I use that. One of them would be like the lugs on a new can capacitor. They're kind of hard to get solder to stick to at times, and this stuff cleans them right up and it adheres great, so it's worth having around. And this is the stuff that it's a paste, so let's see if I can open it with one hand. So I'll dip the tip of the soldering iron and the desoldering gun in there from time to time. I've also got this Kester 186 RMA liquid flux I use sometimes. And I've bought this Chip Quick tacky flux for when I'm working on some surface mount stuff. Alright, I'm going to put the camera on a tripod now, and we'll talk about my pliers and tweezers and other hand tools. In this video, I'm not covering a lot of the standard tools. I'm kind of going to talk more about some of the special ones that I like to use, since everyone has a pair of regular screwdrivers and socket wrenches and things like that. So as far as pliers go, I've got a few here. So these Exolite pliers here, these are actually smooth jaw. I use these quite a bit. These are good for forming leads on vacuum tube equipment around terminal strips and vacuum tube pin sockets, and also just pulling the old leads apart when you're desoldering them. Part number on these is LM7, or LN is in November 775-5. These are old stock ones I found on eBay, made in the USA. So those are handy. I've got these Knipex. These are bent. Those come in handy too. I use these quite a bit. There's the part number on them if you're curious. 3542115. These are the ESD version. The regular one is blue and red. Probably don't need these, but I mean, probably don't need the ESD capability of them, but it was only a couple dollars more, so why not? I've got a bunch of Arum cutters. I have a bunch of Arum pliers too, but I'm only showing you some of my favorites. These are the 576 TX. These are carbide. These are like normally $275 a pair. I guess they're used in surgical equipment assembly or something, making stents and things like that. But the carbide tips are nice on them. And they've got a nice pointy tip too, so you can cut right up against something. So those are great. I got them on eBay. They're like 25 bucks. So they're super sharp, nice small size, nice cushioned handle. Another pair of Arums I have is the 2482E, and these are nice because they're long and they're angled, so you can almost reach straight down. You can pretty much reach straight down into a device and cut with them. So those really come in handy. I like having that capability. I've also got these Arum 510 AE wire strippers. These are cool because they strip the wire at the end, so if you're reaching down into something, you can do it, whereas with a regular pair of pliers, you're kind of pulling up, or wire cutters, your strippers, you're cutting up from the side. They were kind of pricey, but they've paid for themselves. A lot of solid state receivers, when you're working on them, I feel like, for example, if you're working with wire wrap, they don't leave you enough slack to cut it back and rewire wrap it, so you end up having to cut the wrapped part off, strip a little bit off the end and solder it in, but sometimes you can't really get the wire out very far, so being able to reach in with these and strip it is nice. The only problem with them is you have to adjust this set screw for each gauge, so you really gotta, if you're switching between like 18 and 20 gauge or 20 and 22, you really gotta play with a piece of scrap wire to dial it in every time, and they're too expensive to have multiple pairs of, so, but they do come in handy. As As far as tweezers go, I have a couple pairs of Arum tweezers. I've got these straight ones, which are part number E3CSA, again for surface mount type work. I've got these 45-degree angle, which is E5CSA, and these ones, another angle, these are E7SA, and these are also pretty expensive, but you can find them for sale on eBay from time to time for a pretty good price, and I do like the foam handles on these. Speaking of wire wrap, if you're working on solid state vintage stereo equipment, you're going to want a wire wrap tool. You're mostly going to be using the side to remove the wire wrap, which is this side. You can flip this over, and that's the side to install the wire wrap, but like I said earlier, you're normally soldering whatever you unwrapped, unless you want a whole new piece of wire. And I forget what brand these are, but I think these ones are pretty pricey. These are OK Industries KB224, but there's some cheap ones you can get on Amazon and other places. On the topic of wire, my preference for wire is this stuff, which is mil-spec silver-plated copper PTFE insulation. I've got all different gauges and colors. I've got solid and stranded. I've got some twisted pair. It's 18 to 24 gauge for the most part. 200 degrees Celsius insulation, 600 volt. I don't have any of the 1000 volt stuff, but I don't need it. If I need that, I'll special order it for the project. You're also going to want some of this PTFE tubing. This is great for protecting leads in tube gear and other things. This is 18 gauge, I believe it is. There's a part number. So all of this PTFE wire I got from apexjunior.com. He also sells on eBay. Guy's name is Steve. He has a huge inventory of surplus mil-spec wire, and the prices are pretty good. I mean, prices are, I'd say, better than some of the cheap PVC insulation wire you'll get on Amazon. But you are fighting against the scrap cost of copper and silver when you buy this, so it's not the absolute cheapest out there. This is another thing I like to have, these little mini drills. You can get these on Amazon. And I mostly use the 2 or 3 larger ones. And what these come in handy for is when you're replacing TO92L transistors in stereo equipment or other things. With the, what are they, I forget what they're called, but there's a TO92L. It's kind of a longer version of a regular TO92, but they are often replaced with transistors in, this is what, TO126. So you'll see the legs on those are wider, so you need to open up the holes a little bit. So those little drills come in handy. And I don't mount them in a drill, I just use them by hand to carefully open the hole up a bit. You're going to want your magnifying glasses and jeweler's loops and a couple different varieties of those to check on solder joints if you're working on smaller stuff. I've got this bench magnifier and light too. I don't really use that too often, but I have on occasion. Got a dental mirror, and I really like this light. This is a Coast A9R pen light. I do wish it was plastic in case I were to drop it into a live circuit, so that I would probably maybe recommend looking for a plastic version of this, but it's a nice focused. It's not really showing up too good because I have the other lights on. But the other nice thing about this is you can hold it up to the back of a circuit board when you're trying to locate a component, and it'll shine through, and you can find the leads that you're looking for. So I also have this Pace lead forming tool. I don't know if there's a part number on it. It's just called the Comform 1. And what's nice about this, I don't know if I have a circuit board here, but you basically, let's just find, here's a random circuit board. So you just loosen up, it's like, it looks like a caliper, but you can loosen it up, you can put the holes through your, or the pointy parts through the holes in your circuit board, lock it down, and then you bend the leads here. There's 2 spots where you can bend them. So that makes things quite a bit quicker. I used to have, or I still have, I have the other style that some people have, which is this plastic one here, but I don't use this at all anymore. This thing is much more accurate. There's also this end section here that you can use to form transistor leads, and this piece is for bending, I think, like strain relief loops. They show you some stuff in the booklet here. Yeah, stress relief forming post. So this thing is a little overpriced in my opinion. I think it's like $40, but I kind of procrastinated about it for a while, but once I got it, I couldn't be without it. And it also comes with a pocket protector, so how can you go wrong? As far as chemicals go, we could probably have a whole video on that. I already covered flux. You're going to want your 99% isopropyl alcohol. I buy this from the case on Amazon. I'm not sure if they sell this brand anymore. I got to take a look, but I have enough to last me a while longer. I recently bought this MG Chemicals Flux Remover, which is a bit more aggressive than just IPA. I looked at the MSDS for it, and it's actually 75% IPA and 25% N-heptane, which you want to wear gloves with, but it does seem to work a bit better at dissolving the flux on that Kester 44, so this might be worth picking up if you want a slightly better solution. Because what was happening is, like, you can get the flux off with the IPA, but you're really just smearing it around the board for a while, and that seemed to help. I also have the CRC Quick Dry electronic cleaner, which leaves no residue. So that's for like tuning capacitors and other things, or sometimes I'll use it to pre-clean before using deoxit. I've got pretty much all the deoxit products. I've got the D5, which is normally used on switches. I've got the F5, the fader lube, which is very similar to the D5. And I looked at the MSDS for these two. They're mostly naphtha, and then they have a small amount of D100 or F100, which is the pure deoxit. So I have those as well. And the F5 and F100 have a bit more lubricant in them, so those are used for pots and sliders and things like that. There's also brush-on deoxit. Got the D100L brush-on and the G100L. This is for gold-plated stuff, so like if I'm working on a piece of HP test equipment and there's the card edge connectors, I might use it on them. I actually didn't buy this on my own. Deoxit, I actually had a problem with one of Deoxit's products. I bought this metal polish, and it came and it was separated, and I couldn't, no matter how much you shook it, it just wouldn't go back together. And they sent me a new one which does not have the problem, and they also sent me a Deoxit gold kit which included this, which is cool because I kind of wanted some of the gold. And the reason I got this metal polish was because there's no abrasives in it. They have one with abrasives in it, but this one doesn't have it, and I wanted to use that for faceplates on stereo equipment. What else? So I've got this CRC 226 lubricant, which some people use instead of deoxit. They'll use the CRC Quick Dry that I showed earlier, then they'll follow it up with this for a little bit of lubrication. I don't really use it that often. It was more of kind of like an experiment. I've got the CRC Electromotive, which is the more aggressive cleaner. You got to be careful with that. It'll melt some plastic if you're not. And various oils. I have 3-in-1 oil. I like putting them in these little dropper bottles. I've got some Singer sewing machine oil, which is just another type of, I'm not sure if it's a little more viscous than the 3-in-1 oil. It definitely doesn't have a smell, so that's nice to have around. And I like keeping IPA in one of these little squirt bottles with a long tip too. What else? I won't get into glue or anything like that in this video. And for heat sinks and thermal pads, micas, I use the Dowsil 340 silicone heatsink compound. Okay, and as far as some other hand tools go, having a handheld power drill driver, I guess, right? This doesn't take drill bits, it takes these type of bits. You got to get one with a clutch though, because you don't want to blow the heads off of screws when you're installing them. So, you know, this has an adjustable clutch, so you can dial it in just right. We got the Milwaukee. I already had some of the M12 tools, so this made the most sense for me. They're actually kind of hard to find. They're not as common like when you go to like Lowe's or Home Depot. I ordered this online, and there's really not too many cheaper options, honestly. It would have been kind of nice to have one that was a little smaller, but this works great. And that's nice for when you're taking off the bottom covers of receivers. They've got like 16 screws. As far as screwdrivers go, I'll just talk about some of the specialized ones. These are JIS. This is JIS number 2. That's pretty much the one I use 95% of the time, which is also compatible with regular Phillips. And supposedly the more modern Phillips are JIS compatible. So I haven't tested that yet, but the Weras and Wehas and things like that supposedly are JIS. So you probably don't need to buy these, but these vessel screwdrivers are nice. This is a number 1 JIS, smaller. I also have another vessel set. These are, you know, the kind you can switch around. But the whole reason I got these was for Posi drive. And the Posi drive is used on Tektronix and HP test equipment a lot of the time. It looks kind of like a Phillips, but if you really look, it's a little stranger. I don't know if I'll be able to zoom in. Yeah, I'm probably not going to be able to get that for you. So if you ever tried taking Phillips head-looking screws out of Tektronix or HP equipment and they seem like they're stripping, it's because you need a Posi drive. And these Vaco flathead gripping screwdrivers are great for working on vintage tube gear that has a lot of flatheads in it, because you slide this up and it holds onto the screw, so you can do it one-handed without, you don't have to try to hold the screw in when you're trying to put the cover back on the chassis or anything like that. Here's another interesting one. This is for ICs. It's a chip lifter, Wera 127456. You can pry your ICs up out of the socket. It's a nice tool to have. And then this one here, I showed this in another video, GC Electronics 9446. This is for the twist tabs on the Mailery FP style capacitors, the metal can capacitors, for installation and removal. Okay, and we're getting close to the end here. We'll talk about nut drivers and Allen keys. So I've got all Exolite nut drivers. I've got the 4-13-MM, which is the large size metric nut drivers. There's apparently 2 different versions of this. There's one that comes with a 10mm, but it's missing, I forget, the 12 maybe. Then this one doesn't come with a 10, but it comes with an 11, 12, 13. I don't know why they changed that. I think there's some overlap between them and the standard sizes, but these are good to have around. I also have the standard version of these, which is the HS 6-18, and these are perfect for removing nuts from pots, faceplates on receivers, all that kind of stuff. Usually the larger sizes, but they're hollow, so they go over the shaft of the pot. You could use the regular socket set too, but I like the smell of these. They smell wonderful. I wish you could smell them through the camera. And then I have the smaller ones as well, PS 120, which is the standard sizes with the little torque amplifier handle. These also smell wonderful. And the PS 121mm, which is the metric version of those. And I did find these on eBay. I made sure to look for the made in USA ones. They started making them in China. And what I noticed about the newer Chinese ones, I actually ordered this specific set new on Amazon, the Chinese built. And if you look at this, I'm not sure what they call this, but it's not chamfered at all. It's like perfectly flat, whereas the new ones were like chamfered there on the edge. So the nut actually gripped up a little ways, and it didn't grip as good, where these are like perfectly flat on the end. So definitely lower quality on the new Chinese Exolites. So try to buy these used if you do on eBay or wherever else you can get them. And then Allen's, I've got the Exolite PS89 hex standard sizes. And the reason I like these over the L-shaped keys is that if you're working on the faceplate of a piece of stereo gear, you don't have room for the L part sometimes. So you really want a straight in shot with that. And then for the metric, I bought these Weras. These are really nice. These are metric, pretty small sizes. I think 1 millimeter, well, 0.9, actually maybe even below that. 0.7 up to 2.5 and 3. So these, for Japanese branded receivers, you're going to want the metric Allen tools. And again, like I bought these, I think I was working on a Yamaha CR 2040 or something, and I think this was the one I needed, a 2 millimeter, in order to get one of the flat knobs off the front. You kind of had to just go straight up, and you couldn't use an L-shaped Allen. So as I was editing the video, additional tools kept popping into my mind that I didn't talk about. So I'm going to do one more pass here. First thing we've got is this mini engraver. This is good for stripping solder mask off of damaged circuit boards. Like if you have a trace that lifted or broke, you can just grind it off with this, and then you expose some bare copper, tin it, and solder your leg on that you folded over. This is a fuse puller for glass fuses and also the automotive style fuses, but you basically put this around the fuse and turn it a little, and you can hold onto it and pull it out, which comes in handy for fuses that are hard to get to. I don't know if this is made by Bus. It is made by Bus. There's no part number on it. I never knew these existed. There's also some 3D printed models that people have made online that you can print if you need a fuse puller. I've also got this pair of pliers. These are Utica 777-6s. Pretty iconic needle nose electronics pliers. These are grippy. They're long. They're good for placing components in hard to reach areas. Is what I use them for most often. This is a trim pot tool. This is actually a Bourne's branded one, and it's got the recessed end for the multi-turn trimmers and a regular flat screwdriver end. You can get away with a screwdriver, but this is kind of nice because like the recessed end kind of just locates itself on the pot. And then of course for tuner work, you've got your non-conductive tuning adjusters. I mostly use the hex-shaped ones out of this kit. This is the GC Electronics, I think it's a CB radio kit for IF transformers and things like that in tuners. And I also have a bunch of these Vessel ceramic screwdrivers, which I use as well. For tuner work, it's mostly just one of them, this really small one, 1.3 millimeters by 30, non-conductive, non-magnetic, just as good as plastic, but a little stiffer. So got a couple of those in different sizes as well. I sometimes find it's handy to use a pencil eraser to clean contacts and card edge connectors and other things that get dirt or corrosion on them. So I bought a dedicated eraser. This is a Tombow Mono Zero, and it's a fairly small diameter. It's 2.3 millimeters, so it's just an eraser on a stick. But what's nice about this is that you can expose just a very small amount of it, so that's fairly stiff. So you get some pretty good cleaning action out of it. And then for the stuff that's a bit more stubborn, there's a, I don't know what this is called, a fiberglass pencil maybe. It's actually fiberglass tip on it, and that really scrubs. But you got to be careful with it because that'll take plating off and things like that. But it's not as aggressive as sandpaper, so kind of adjust it there. And this also leaves some little fiberglass debris afterwards, so you got to be careful to vacuum that out. All right, well, I'm sure I missed a whole bunch of stuff. I could probably talk for hours about this, but hopefully that gives you guys some ideas on tools that might be helpful. And if there's anything you think that I might be missing, I probably already have it, but mention it in the comments, and maybe I'll make another video.